I'm truly grateful that out of countless channels out there, you chose mine. I hope you enjoy the story to the fullest. It would mean a lot if you could leave me some feedback. They say the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. It's a comforting thought, isn't it? A belief that familiarity offers some kind of protection, some kind of predictable boundary. But what happens when the devil you thought you knew intimately, the one whose warmth you slept beside for a decade, the one you built every dream upon, peels back his carefully constructed mask to reveal a hollow-eyed stranger beneath? And worse, what happens when that stranger cracks open the door to your sanctuary, your haven, and beckons another devil inside? My sanctuary wasn't just invaded, it was methodically, cruelly dismantled, brick by agonizing brick. The demolition began subtly, disguised, on a night that hangs in my memory reeking of something sickeningly sweet, like gardenias left too long in stagnant water, mingled with the cheap perfume of well-rehearsed lies. My name is Ava. For 10 years. Precisely 652 days if you count the leap year. I inhabited a life that looked, from the outside, like a flawless diamond. I truly believed it was. Mark, my husband, wasn't just part of my world, he was my world. The sun around which my entire existence obediently revolved. He possessed that intoxicating blend of ambition and effortless charm. The kind of man who could walk into any room and instantly own it, captivating everyone with a magnetic smile and easy confidence. We curated the perfect backdrop for his brilliance, the sprawling house in the most desirable suburb, white picket fence ironically included, the sleek European cars gleaming in the driveway, the meticulously planned dinner parties where I played the gracious hostess, reflecting his success. A perfect life, polished to a blinding sheen, the envy of everyone we knew. And I wasn't just supportive, I was the architect of that support structure. I willingly, eagerly, shelved my own burgeoning career in graphic design, convincing myself that my true calling was to be the wind beneath his wings. My energy, my creativity, my time, all channeled into maintaining our immaculate home. Managing our social calendar, ensuring his climb up the corporate ladder was smooth and unencumbered by domestic trivialities. I bought into the narrative completely. His success was our success. Our foundation, I fervently believed, was bedrock, unshakable, forged in love and shared dreams. How laughably naive I was. It was built on sand, shimmering under the deceptive sun, poised precariously over a hidden, hungry sinkhole. The first faint tremor wasn't alarming, more like a nostalgic sigh echoing from a distant past. Seraphina. The name itself felt like something out of a dated romance novel. Mark's first love. The college sweetheart he'd spoken of occasionally with a wistful, almost cinematic fondness. She materialized back into our orbit about a year before the world imploded, seemingly drifting in on a cloud of misfortune. Recently divorced, looking decidedly fragile, eyes wide with a manufactured vulnerability. Her narrative was carefully crafted, just wanting to reconnect with dear old friends, seeking solace in familiar company after her own heartbreak. Mark, ever the charming hero, played his part flawlessly. He presented it to me wrapped in nobility. Ava, darling, we can't turn our backs on her now, he'd murmured, his hand resting reassuringly on my arm. She's family. Practically. She's going through such a rough patch. His brow furrowed with performative concern. And I, blinded by my role as the supportive, understanding wife, the one who wasn't threatened by ghosts of girlfriends past, readily agreed. Of course, darling. Invite her over. I remember thinking, with a smugness that now curdles my stomach, what possible harm could an old flame, supposedly long extinguished, truly inflict on our impenetrable fortress? The sheer, arrogant folly of that thought still takes my breath away. Seraphina didn't just enter our lives. She infiltrated them with the stealth of a seasoned spy. She wove herself into the fabric of our days so seamlessly it felt almost natural. Dinners at our polished mahogany table, where she'd pick delicately at her food while sighing about her ex-husband's cruelty. Casual weekend brunches where she'd accidentally brush Mark's arm while reaching for the marmalade. Joining us for movie nights, positioning herself subtly closer to him on the plush sofa. Her compliments towards me were always double-edged. "Oh, Eva, your taste is just exquisite. So traditional." I could never pull that off. Her laments about her own situation were designed to elicit sympathy while subtly highlighting Mark's strength and capability in comparison. She mastered the art of the vulnerable predator. Always non-threatening. Always needing Mark's friendly advice or a strong shoulder to cry on. The red flags, in hindsight, waved furiously, mocking my blindness. There were glances exchanged between her and Mark across crowded rooms, infinitesimal moments, but charged with an unspoken intimacy that pricked at my awareness. Shared laughter over inside jokes whispered just out of my earshot, followed by dismissive waves when I inquired. Sudden, noticeable uptick in Mark's late nights at the office. Crucial client dinners I wasn't invited to. His phone, once casually left on the nightstand, now perpetually angled away or kept in his pocket. I noticed. Deep down, a tiny alarm bell kept pinging, but I smothered it relentlessly. "You're being paranoid, Eva. Jealous. Insecure." That became my internal mantra. Shamefully effective. Mark. He reinforced it masterfully. When I'd tentatively voice a flicker of unease. "Seraphina seems to rely on you quite a lot. Doesn't she?" He'd respond with that perfectly pitched tone of wounded concern. "Honey, are you okay? You seem stressed. She's just a friend in need. Surely you're not suggesting?" He'd trail off, letting my own self-doubt fill the silence. He was an absolute virtuoso at making me question my own sanity, my own perception of reality. The night the diamond-perfect illusion finally, irrevocably shattered began with crushing banality. It was a Tuesday. Mark was, predictably, working late, tied up with a critical project deadline, urgent conference calls, the usual vague yet important-sounding excuses. Seraphina had sent me a typically pathetic text earlier, a blurry photo of a sad-looking microwave lasagna. Captioned, "Lonely night in again. Thinking of you guys. XO." The casual intimacy of the XO now felt like a deliberate twist of the knife. Around 9 p.m. A trivial thought surfaced. My favorite scarf. A ridiculously expensive cashmere wrap Mark had given me for my birthday. A symbol, I'd thought, of his attentiveness, was still draped over the passenger seat of his car from when I'd borrowed it that morning. The air had turned chilly, and the thought of its luxurious warmth for my planned early morning walk tomorrow was appealing. On a whim, fueled by a strange mix of boredom and a lingering desire to enact some small gesture of connection, I decided to drive to his downtown office tower. I'd surprise him, maybe bring him a fancy coffee from that place he liked. Grab my scarf. Be the doting wife. A small, insignificant errand. Or so I thought. His car, the gleaming black sedan he polished obsessively every weekend, wasn't in its designated, brightly lit executive spot near the entrance. A prickle of unease. That was unusual. He hated parking anywhere else. I slowly circled the multi-level parking structure, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, casting long, distorted shadows. Maybe he'd parked on a different level? And then I saw it, tucked away in the darkest, most remote corner of the lowest level, a section rarely used after hours, shadowed by thick concrete pillars. His car, instantly recognizable. My breath hitched. Why would he park there? And then I realized. with a lurch in my stomach that sent ice water through my veins. The interior light wasn't on, but the windows were heavily steamed. On a cool night, my blood didn't just run cold. It felt like it solidified, turning to lead in my veins. I killed my engine, switched off my headlights, maneuvering my own sensible SUV behind a hulking construction van parked nearby. Concealed in the gloom, my hands, I remember looking down at them, gripping the steering wheel, and they were shaking so violently they seemed detached from my body. Through the condensation blurring the windows of his car, I could make out shapes, silhouettes, two heads, inclined towards each other, impossibly, devastatingly close. A fleeting illumination, the brief, blue-white flare of a phone screen being checked inside the car. Just a second or two, but it was long enough to see the unmistakable curve of Seraphina's cheekbone, her distinctively styled dark hair, long enough to see her hand, possessively, tenderly, caressing Mark's cheek as he leaned into her touch. His eyes closed. The air left my lungs in a silent gasp. It felt like a physical impact, a punch to the solar plexus that stole my breath and buckled my knees. Even though I was sitting down, it, raw, brutal, and utterly disorienting, surged through me, rooting me to the spot. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't insecurity. This was real. How long? The question screamed silently in my mind. How long had this been happening? Behind my back, right under my nose, in the very car where he drove me, where we listened to music, where we planned our future. The calculated betrayal, the sheer, brazen disrespect of it, was a separate wound, deeper and fouler than the infidelity itself. I remained frozen, a spectator at the execution of my own marriage. Watched for what felt like an agonizing hour but was probably mere minutes. As their embrace tightened, their silhouettes merging in the dim light, the phone screen flickered off, plunging them back into intimate darkness. I didn't storm over there. I didn't pound on the windows or scream accusations. What words existed for this? My throat felt raw, constricted by unshed screams and bile. My mind was a maelstrom. A chaotic vortex of images, memories, lies, hurt, and a nascent, terrifying rage. A strange, detached autopilot took over. I put my car in reverse, backing out with painstaking slowness, my movements unnaturally silent, like a ghost slipping away from a crime scene. The drive home was a journey through a suddenly alien landscape. Familiar streets seemed warped, sinister. The warm glow from neighborhood windows felt mocking. When I finally reached our house, it loomed before me like a mausoleum, beautiful on the outside, but cold and dead within. The key scraped in the lock, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. The air felt thick, heavy with unspoken secrets. Every carefully chosen piece of furniture, every framed photograph capturing a manufactured smile, every object now seemed like a prop in an elaborate, cruel stage play where I, the devoted leading lady, was the only one who hadn't been given the real script. The bedrock foundation I'd built my life upon hadn't just cracked, it had pulverized into dust, dropping me into a terrifying, bottomless abyss of pain and profound uncertainty. Standing utterly alone in the opulent hallway of my suddenly hollowed-out life, staring at the vacant space where the man I loved should have been. One single, horrifying question echoed in the deafening silence, clawing at the edges of my sanity. Now what? The days immediately following the shattering discovery in the parking garage weren't days at all, but a descent into a gray, formless purgatory. Time lost its meaning. I existed, but only in the most mechanical sense, trapped in a thick, insulating fog of grief and a corrosive, white-hot rage that simmered just beneath the surface, threatening to scald me from the inside out. I floated through the house like a specter, performing routine tasks, making coffee I didn't drink, tidying rooms that felt alien, while my insides twisted into knots of betrayal. Sleep became a battleground, offering no respite. When exhaustion finally claimed me, my dreams were invaded by relentless, looping images, the steamed-up car windows, Seraphina's profile, Mark's closed eyes as he leaned into her touch. I'd wake with a jolt, heart pounding, sweat slicking my skin. The phantom ache of heartbreak as real as any physical wound. Worst of all was Mark's presence. His touch, once a source of comfort, now felt like a violation, making my skin crawl. Every feigned gesture of affection, a casual hand on my shoulder, a supposedly concerned inquiry about my subdued mood. The routine kiss goodbye at the door sent waves of nausea through me. His voice, once melodic, now grated on my nerves. The charming, attentive husband had become a repulsive stranger occupying familiar space. His every word, every look, steeped in the poisonous residue of his deceit. How could I have been so blind? How could the man I knew, or thought I knew, be capable of such calculated cruelty? My eyes had delivered the verdict, stark and undeniable. But a part of me, the part still clinging desperately to the wreckage of our life, needed more. Hard proof. Evidence that would silence the insidious inner voice whispering that maybe, just maybe, I had somehow misinterpreted, exaggerated. Rationalization is a powerful sedative when facing unbearable pain. So, I waited. I watched him, mimicking normalcy, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. My chance came during one of his lengthy, important conference calls. The ones he now took exclusively from his home office. Door firmly shut, claiming I needed a file from the shared family computer in the study. I slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind me. My hands, those traitorous limbs that had stopped shaking after the initial shock, trembled anew as I sat before the machine. Passwords. We'd always shared everything. Passwords included. Transparency builds trust, he used to say. The irony was a bitter pill. I typed in the familiar sequence, each keystroke echoing unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Access granted. And there, buried beneath layers of innocuous-sounding folders, client proposals, vacation ideas 2023, Project Nightingale. The sickly sweet name alone made me want to retch, lay the unvarnished, brutal truth. It wasn't just a handful of guilty messages hastily deleted. It was an archive, a meticulous chronicle of their affair. Explicit emails detailing rendezvous, praising each other's performances, laced with cruel, mocking assessments of me, my naivete, my trust, my cluelessness. These were apparently frequent topics of amusement for them. Photos, dozens of them. Selfies taken in hotel rooms I'd never seen. Grinning widely, arms wrapped around each other. Candids from romantic dinners at restaurants we'd never frequented together. Videos, short, intimate clips that made bile rise in my throat. And the receipts. Oh God. The receipts. Florists, jewelers, boutique hotels in charming nearby towns where Mark had claimed to be attending tedious industry conferences. Airline tickets for two, not to business destinations, but to sun-drenched tropical islands. Picturesque European cities. Trips taken while I diligently watered the plants and waited for his calls. This wasn't some recent, impulsive mistake. The digital trail snaked back for months, possibly almost a full year, coinciding chillingly with Seraphina's reappearance. The depth, the duration, the calculation of the deceit was staggering, suffocating. Seraphina wasn't merely a passive participant swept away by circumstance. She was an active collaborator, her messages dripping with smug satisfaction, egging Mark on, seemingly deriving a perverse pleasure from the wreckage she was helping create. They weren't just stealing moments. They were methodically constructing an entire alternate life, funded by our shared resources, built upon the foundations of my trust. And apparently, they found the whole sordid process quite amusing. Armed with this soul-crushing mountain of evidence, I attempted a confrontation. Just once. Carefully. Deliberately. I printed a single, damning email. One where Mark explicitly discussed lying to me about a weekend trip he took with her. I laid it on his desk during a quiet moment. My voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in my hands. Mark. I began. I think we need to talk about this. His reaction was a horrifyingly predictable, yet nonetheless devastating. Masterclass in manipulation and gaslighting. Phase 1. Absolute denial. Shocked innocence. Where did you get this? Eva. What is this? Is this some kind of joke? Phase 2. Deflection and blame shifting. His voice took on a wounded tone. I've been feeling so disconnected from you lately. Eva. You've been so distant. Always stressed about something. Maybe that's the real issue here. Phase 3. Righteous indignation. Accusations hurled back at me. You went through my private emails? How could you? After everything. You don't trust me. You're trying to sabotage my work. My reputation. With this paranoia. He spun a web so intricate. So filled with feigned hurt and logical fallacies. That for a terrifying moment, he almost succeeded. That insidious self-doubt flickered again. Maybe I am overreacting? Maybe I did invade his privacy unjustly? But then I looked into his eyes. And I saw it. Not a flicker of genuine remorse. Not a shred of guilt. Just cold, hard calculation and a flicker of annoyance. That I'd found him out. That I was making things inconvenient. That single, revealing glimpse shattered the last vestiges of hope. He wasn't sorry he did it, he was only sorry he got caught. After that abortive confrontation, the flimsy pretense crumbled entirely. He barely bothered hiding it anymore. It was like flipping a switch. Seraphina started appearing at the house more frequently. Her visits no longer masked by flimsy excuses. She'd swan in unannounced. A proprietary air about her. Touching objects. Rearranging cushions. Marking her territory in my home while I stood by. Feeling like an unwelcome guest. Mark. Adopting a tone of faux reasonable concern. Suggested I move into the guest room. Just temporarily. Eva. To give us both some space. To think. Space for what? For them to continue their affair under my own roof without inconvenience? Presenting documents thick with dense legal clauses. He assured me. His eyes boring into mine with unsettling intensity. That it was absolutely vital. Purely for our benefit. Our protection. Consumed by a maelstrom of heartbreak. Bewildered by the financial complexities. And clinging to a desperate, pathetic sliver of hope that perhaps this, trusting him with my inheritance, might somehow demonstrate my faith and bridge the widening chasm between us. I signed. Document after document. Like a lamb to the slaughter. Weeks passed. A gnawing suspicion grew as Mark came back with yet another urgent request for a transfer authorization. Another vaguely explained investment opportunity requiring immediate action. The smooth reassurances now sounded hollow. Practiced. My dormant brain cells, the ones not completely numbed by grief, finally screamed a warning, shaking off the lethargy. I made a call. I contacted Mr. Abernathy, the elderly, kind family lawyer who had set up the trust years ago and still acted as a secondary trustee. I explained my vague unease, my confusion over the recent flurry of activity. What Mr. Abernathy uncovered over the next few painstaking days sent me crashing down into a chasm of despair far deeper than infidelity alone could carve. Mark hadn't just been reallocating or diversifying. He had been systematically looting the trust, employing loopholes I hadn't understood, exploiting the authority I'd foolishly granted him. He had siphoned off enormous sums, transferring them incrementally into a web of newly created accounts I had no knowledge of, no access to, accounts likely held jointly with Seraphina, or possibly under her name entirely. They weren't just stealing my husband, my marriage, my peace of mind. They were methodically stealing my financial security, my future independence, the legacy my grandparents had worked their entire lives to leave me. That was absolute rock bottom. Picture it, me, alone in that enormous, echoing house that now felt like a beautifully decorated prison. Betrayed on the most intimate level by the man I had dedicated my life to. Financially violated. Stripped bare of my inheritance. Forced to watch helplessly as he openly flaunted his affair with the venomous woman who had actively participated in my ruin. I felt less than human. Like an empty husk. Discarded and plundered. The tears finally refused to come. Dried up by the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. Replaced by a terrifying, chilling emptiness. They had taken everything. They expected me to simply collapse. To crawl away into the shadows and disappear. Leaving them free to toast their victory with champagne bought with my money. They honestly believed they had broken me beyond repair. And perhaps, for one fragile, teetering moment, they had. Perhaps I was broken. But as I sat there, surrounded by the damning evidence, the bank statements detailing the systematic theft, the mocking emails, the pictures of their stolen happiness, something unexpected began to stir within that cavernous emptiness. It wasn't grief anymore. It wasn't even simple sadness. It was a spark, tiny, cold, hard ember of pure, unadulterated rage. A rage ignited not just by the infidelity, but by the calculated cruelty, the breathtaking audacity, the absolute vacuum where their consciences should have been. And riding tandem with that burgeoning rage came a strange, unexpected surge of clarity, like lightning illuminating a dark landscape. For years, as a quiet rebellion against the stifling perfectionism Mark demanded, as an escape from the suffocating reality of my diminishing self, I'd nurtured a secret, a hidden passion, digital art, under the cloak of an anonymous online pseudonym, Noctua, the owl. Seeing in the dark, I created complex, atmospheric digital paintings, abstract landscapes reflecting my own inner turmoil. I sold them quietly through niche online galleries and platforms catering to digital art collectors. It was my private world, my sanctuary, something entirely separate from Ava, Mark's perfect wife. I never considered it significant, never tallied the income seriously. Just a hobby, my little secret. That night, fueled by a desperate, primal need to grasp onto something that was solely mine, something they hadn't tainted or stolen, I logged into my Noctua creator account. Morbid curiosity mingled with a flicker of defiance. And I stared at the screen. The numbers. The steady stream of sales over the past few years. The flattering messages from collectors. The rapidly growing follower count on the art platforms. The unexpectedly substantial balance sitting quietly in my linked private account. An account Mark knew nothing about. It wasn't lottery winnings. Not yet. But it was real. Earned. Untouched. Right. And it was far more significant than I had ever allowed myself to acknowledge. In that precise moment, the stark juxtaposition hit me with the force of an electric shock. The evidence of their calculated theft lying scattered on my desk, versus the undeniable proof of the independent success I had quietly, unknowingly built in the shadows. Something inside me didn't just snap, it recalibrated. The weeping victim suffocated. And a cold, methodical strategist clawed her way out of the wreckage. The tears evaporated. The trembling in my hands ceased, replaced by a glacial stillness. A profound, terrifying calm settled over me. They thought I was collateral damage. A discarded, naive wife they could fleece and forget without consequence. They saw me as weak, dependent, broken. They didn't know about Noctua. They didn't know about the growing balance in my secret account. They certainly didn't know about the meticulous file, digital and physical. I began compiling with chilling efficiency. Every incriminating email saved and backed up. Every suspicious bank transfer highlighted. Every overheard lie. Every broken promise noted with date and time. They had no concept of the sheer, unyielding resolve that can be forged in the fires of absolute betrayal when someone is pushed far, far beyond their breaking point. They wanted a war? They had certainly started one. They'd fired the first shots, confident in their perceived superiority. Fine. But I would finish it. Not with hysterics or messy confrontations, but with calculated precision. On my terms. A slow, cold smile, the first genuine, albeit terrifying, expression I'd felt in what seemed like an eternity, finally touched my lips. Reflected dimly in the dark computer screen. Mark. Seraphina. My voice, when I whispered it aloud into the empty room, was steady, devoid of tremor. You arrogant fools. You have absolutely no idea what's coming. The game wasn't over. Not by a long shot. It was just beginning. The ensuing months unfolded like a meticulously choreographed ballet of deception. On the surface, I became the embodiment of the grieving, eventually resigned wife. I allowed Mark to see the tears when strategically useful. I engaged in quiet, melancholic discussions about separation agreements, letting him believe he was controlling the narrative, steering the inevitable breakup towards a conclusion favorable to him. I played the part of a woman slowly, painfully accepting the end of her marriage, too heartbroken and bewildered to fight back effectively. Outwardly, I was fading. Inwardly, I was forging armor. Beneath this carefully maintained facade of passive sorrow, I operated with the ruthless efficiency of a five-star general plotting a complex military campaign. Every single interaction became data collection. Every phone call Mark made regarding finances, often carelessly loud, assuming I wasn't listening. Every casual mention of his plans with Seraphina. Every document he condescendingly explained was just a formality for me to sign. It was all logged, cross-referenced, filed away in my rapidly expanding dossier of deceit. Where legally permissible in my state, conversations were recorded, capturing his smooth lies and false reassurances in his own damning voice. My grief became my camouflage, my seeming apathy, my shield, my secret life as Noctua exploded. The raw pain, the simmering fury, the icy resolve, it all bled into my digital canvases, creating art that was darker, more intense, more compelling than anything I'd produced before. Critics raved about the newfound depth and visceral power of Noctua's work. Commissions poured in from high-profile clients and international galleries. The irony was exquisite. The very source of my agony was fueling my hidden success, building the war chest I needed for the impending battle. My anonymity remained absolute, a critical advantage. Mark, blinded by his own arrogance and preoccupied with juggling his affair while meticulously plundering my trust fund, remained utterly oblivious. He simply saw me as drifting, listless, occasionally retreating to my hobby room for hours I was actually spending on secure video calls with gallery owners in London, negotiating contracts with tech companies for digital installations, and, most importantly, consulting with a team of high-powered, razor-sharp lawyers specializing in complex financial fraud and contentious divorces, funded entirely by the rapidly accumulating earnings of the helpless wife he was so callously discarding. My legal team, initially cautious, became galvanized as I laid out the staggering evidence I had compiled. They traced the labyrinthine path of my stolen money. Dates, times, amounts, a precise map of Mark's calculated theft. We discovered the specifics. Shell accounts Seraphina had helped set up. Wire transfers masked as legitimate business expenses. The icing on the cake? A significant chunk of my inheritance had been funneled directly into a shaky wellness and lifestyle startup Seraphina had launched, a venture already showing signs of serious financial instability. Built on ridiculous pseudoscience and fueled apparently by my stolen funds. Their greed wasn't just immoral. It was becoming dangerously sloppy. Arrogant. They felt untouchable. And then, they handed me the perfect stage for their public execution. Wrapped in silk and tied with a gaudy bow. Mark and Seraphina, eager to cement their status as the city's newest power couple and publicly flaunt their triumph, decided to host a lavish engagement party. Not some quiet gathering of close friends. Oh no. They booked the city's most exclusive venue, the panoramic rooftop terrace of the glittering new 5-star hotel downtown. The guest list was a who's who of Mark's corporate world, crucial clients he was trying to woo, senior partners he aimed to impress, influential colleagues, and even, unforgivably, a handful of our former, mutual friends. The ones who had seamlessly transferred their allegiance, offering me pitying glances while accepting Seraphina's invitations. They intended this party as their coronation. A brazen declaration of their victory over the ashes of our marriage. They couldn't have designed a more perfect, high-stakes platform for my counteroffensive if I'd planned it myself. My lawyers, pragmatic to the core, urged restraint. Settle quietly, Eva. We have enough leverage to get your money back. Avoid the public mess. But settlement felt incomplete. It wouldn't erase the humiliation. It wouldn't address the profound violation. It wouldn't hold them truly accountable in the court of public opinion. The arena they clearly valued so highly. But I needed more than just my money back. I needed to dismantle the facade they had so carefully constructed. I needed everyone they sought to impress to witness their true character. Stripped bare under the glare of the spotlight they craved. My plan evolved beyond mere financial recovery. It became an act of narrative reclamation. The night of the engagement party arrived. Buzzing with false festivity. I made my entrance deliberately, fashionably late. Long after the sycophantic congratulations had reached their peak. I didn't slip in unnoticed. I arrived. Not as the tearful, broken Ava they might have expected to hear was hiding at home. Consumed by misery. As Noctua. Shedding her anonymity for one spectacular night. I wore a gown the color of arterial blood. A stark, stunning crimson sheath. A color of defiance I'd never dared wear under Mark's subtly controlling gaze. My hair, usually pulled back neatly, cascaded in sleek, dark waves. My makeup was dramatic, emphasizing my eyes, now clear and hard as polished obsidian. My posture, honed by months of steely resolve, radiated a chilling confidence that acted like a physical force, silencing the room the moment I stepped from the elevator onto the glittering terrace. A ripple of shock, then frantic whispers, followed me like my own shadow as I moved through the crowd. Mark and Seraphina, positioned center stage like royalty, holding court and champagne flutes, froze mid-laugh. They're identical. Plastic smiles faltered, then vanished. Raw surprise, quickly morphing into visible annoyance and perhaps a flicker of fear, flashed across Mark's face. Seraphina's perfectly made-up features tightened, her eyes narrowing into slits of pure, unadulterated venom. They exchanged a panicked glance. What was I doing here? I savored their discomfort. I ignored their stunned stares initially, gliding through the throng, greeting a few carefully chosen acquaintances with icy politeness, accepting a flute of their expensive champagne from a passing waiter. I let the tension coil, thicken, become almost unbearable. Let them squirm. Let the entire room buzz with speculation. Precisely as Mark raised his glass to begin a sickeningly smug toast about closing old chapters, embracing authentic happiness, and finding his true soulmate, gesturing towards a beaming Seraphina, I made my move. "Excuse me." My voice, amplified slightly by the state-of-the-art sound system, a small, technical adjustment I'd arranged with a disgruntled freelance technician earlier that day, cut through his speech, calm yet resonant, carrying to every corner of the suddenly silent terrace. All heads swiveled towards me. Mark, Seraphina. I let their names hang in the air for a beat. Since this seems to be an evening dedicated to celebrating honesty, I infused the word with dripping sarcasm. And new beginnings. I felt it was only appropriate to contribute a few significant truths of my own to the occasion. Mark's carefully tanned face drained of color, turning a pasty gray beneath the flattering party lights. Seraphina's perfectly manicured hand gripped his arm like a talon, her knuckles bone white. "Eva," Mark stammered, desperately trying to regain control, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "This is hardly the time or the place. Perhaps we can discuss this privately." "Oh, I disagree, Mark," I countered, taking a deliberate step forward, commanding the central space. Given the audience, I gestured vaguely at the sea of important faces now staring. Rapt. "I believe this is the perfect time and place." And on cue, as if by magic, the large, sleek display screens strategically positioned around the terrace, originally intended for a saccharine slideshow of Mark and Seraphina's staged happiness, flickered to life. But instead of romantic selfies, they displayed something far more compelling. Crystal clear images filled the screens. Scanned bank statements with damning transaction histories highlighted. Screenshots of intimate, incriminating emails exchanged between Mark and Seraphina, not just lovers' whispers, but cold, hard discussions about accessing my trust, strategizing how to move funds without alerting me or Mr. Abernathy, timelines correlating massive withdrawals from my accounts with Mark's purchases of luxury cars, expensive jewelry, clearly not for me, and first-class tickets for their secret rendezvous. Even short, crystal-clear audio snippets, captured legally on my own property, Mark's voice, smooth as silk, reassuring me that the trust funds were secure and growing, contrasted sharply with recordings of him instructing bankers to wire significant sums to offshore accounts linked to Seraphina. Audible gasps swept through the stunned crowd. Faces, moments ago masks of polite interest or feigned enthusiasm, now registered shock, fascination, disgust. Eyes darted from the damning evidence on the screens to the mortified couple, trapped in the glare of their own spotlight. "These celebrated new beginnings," I declared, my voice ringing with ice-cold fury, devoid of tremor, "were entirely funded by theft, by the calculated, systematic draining of an inheritance left to me by my loving grandparents. Money Mark swore an oath to protect, while he was secretly, methodically funneling it directly into her bank accounts." I pointedly did not look at Seraphina, and pouring it into her laughably fraudulent, failing business venture. As a final exhibit, I projected one last image onto the screens. An official valuation report and press clippings related to the anonymous digital artist Noctua, showcasing recent record-breaking auction sales, lucrative gallery representation contracts, and projected earnings well into the seven figures. "And while the two of you," I finally met Mark's horrified gaze, then shifted to Seraphina's frozen mask of disbelief, "were so very busy congratulating yourselves on robbing me blind, utterly convinced I was just a pathetic, helpless fool you could financially gut and discard like trash. I was otherwise occupied. I was busy building my own damn empire. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. An empire you knew absolutely nothing about. An empire whose earnings, ironically, funded the formidable legal team who will now ensure you both face the full legal and financial consequences of your despicable actions. Utter pandemonium erupted. Mark, white-faced and trembling, began sputtering incoherent denials, pointing frantically at the screens. But the sheer volume and clarity of the evidence were irrefutable. Seraphina looked like she'd been struck by lightning, her meticulously crafted facade shattering, revealing raw panic as she saw not only her reputation in tatters but her stolen financial lifeline about to be ruthlessly severed. People were physically backing away from them, turning their backs. Horrified whispers escalated into loud condemnations. Powerful clients Mark desperately needed to impress exchanged disgusted glances and began pointedly heading for the elevators. The glittering engagement party dissolved in real time into a spectacular, current, social annihilation event. Just as hotel security guards began moving purposefully towards the center of the chaos, undoubtedly summoned by a panicked Mark. I delivered my piece de resistance. My final, quiet twist, stepping closer to Mark, leaning in slightly so only he and perhaps Seraphina and a few stunned onlookers nearby could hear clearly above the din. I added softly, voice dripping venom. Oh, Mark, you know that final, highly speculative, disastrous investment you poured the last accessible six-figure chunk of my money into last month? The one Seraphina swore was a guaranteed gold mine. I paused, watching the flicker of dawning horror in his eyes. I knew it was a complete scam, Mark. My financial advisor flagged it weeks before you even signed the papers. I had proof. I could have warned you. I gave a tiny, humorless smile. I didn't. I let you walk straight into that flaming pit, taking my stolen money with you. Consider it a non-refundable tuition fee for your overdue education and consequences. His face crumpled completely then, the understanding hitting him that he hadn't just been exposed, he'd been strategically, ruthlessly played to the very end. I didn't linger to savor the carnage. That wasn't the point. My objective was achieved. Holding my head high, radiating a power I hadn't known I possessed a year ago. I turned my back on the wreckage of their reputations and walked calmly, deliberately, through the parting crowd towards the elevators, leaving them to drown in the toxic fallout of their own creation. The aftermath, I later learned, was swift and brutal. Mark was fired from his high-profile job almost immediately. He faced protracted legal battles initiated by the trustees, spearheaded by Mr. Abernathy and funded by me, to recover every stolen cent. Plus damages. Investors suckered into Seraphina's sham startup, armed with the information revealed at the party, likely initiated their own lawsuits. Their toxic relationship, unsurprisingly, imploded spectacularly under the immense pressure of public disgrace, financial ruin, and furious mutual blame. Last I heard, they were locked in their own bitter legal fight, viciously turning on each other over whatever meager scraps remained. Poetic justice. In its own ugly way. Me. I didn't just get my money back. I reclaimed something far more valuable, myself. Freed from the constraints of Mark's expectations and the need for secrecy. My art career as Ava Noctua last name soared to astonishing new heights. I moved across the country, bought a light-filled studio overlooking the ocean, and fully embraced my independence, my creativity, my hard-won strength. They attempted to erase me, to diminish me, to reduce me to a footnote in their sordid story. They profoundly underestimated the resilient fire they inadvertently ignited within me. They thought they were burying Ava, the compliant wife. They had no idea they were actually planting the seed for Noctua, the powerful artist, to rise from the ashes, stronger, and more authentically alive than they could ever comprehend. And living this vibrant, successful, genuinely happy life, entirely free from their poisonous influence, that I discovered with profound satisfaction.